Hi, thanks for tuning in. This is the US Futures Weekly Chart Analysis for the week ending 11th of August 2023. First chart is the US Dollar Index Futures, as usual. It's always a really important chart to look at. It affects so many other charts in this series. The most important line at the moment is this little breakdown line here. You can see the market did push lower and appear to be breaking down, but the breakdown has been rejected. And last week, price came up and challenged this breakdown line. And this week, the market has put in a little test for supply and pushed above. This market's attempting to absorb its way through this breakdown line. Volume was quite low, so selling pressure appears to be quite low, and that's allowing the market to float higher on relatively low volumes. Sometimes when you look at a weekly chart like this and you want to see in more detail what's been going on, it's worth looking inside the bar. So here's the daily chart. And the first bar this week was here. This was Monday. It was following this push lower here. And in hindsight, we can see that was an absorption bar. The market pushed up from the previous close and then drifted lower on low volume. Now, at the time, you wouldn't have known whether that was weakness or not. Because the bar traded inside the previous bar's range all day and closed as a slight up bar, it wasn't a very negative bar, but it closed low, and that can be concerning. In hindsight, we can see the next bar was up and quite strongly, so that means this was then an absorption bar, and price moved up, tagged the highs of the range here, and closed just off it. Next bar was a test for supply, then a little shakeout, and then a nice response to the shakeout. Some people do say a test and a shakeout equals a breakout, and that's kind of what we look like we're getting here, at least an attempt to break out. So we'll see how that goes. Just so you can see again, there was an absorption bar this week, a response higher, a test for supply, a mini shakeout, and a positive response to the shakeout, and prices challenging the highs of the daily range. The weekly range probably comes through there, I imagine, and you can see that the market has been absorbing the supply just above this weekly level, and price looks like it's successfully going to move above it. There's the weekly chart again. You can see here's the important level, and the period of absorption took place through here, and price has moved above this line this week on relatively low volume, just below average volume. So selling pressure is light. What selling pressure is there has been absorbed by the looks. That leaves the market in a pretty good place. Next chart is the E-mini S&P. This is S&P 500 index futures. Price has pulled back a little over the last 2 weeks. Although you can see that spreads narrowed this week and the thrust lower has reduced considerably on increased volume. So buying support has emerged in this market. Whether it'll be successful or not, we'll have to wait and see, but there has been some buying support emerge. You would suggest looking at that. There was a little attempt to move higher here initially from the previous close, but that's failed. Prices drifted lower, but spreads narrowed on an increase in volume. So some modest buying supports emerged right at the lows of this range here, which has been weakened to some extent. You can see the supply that's been drawn out as price moved into this level previously. So look for an attempt to move higher here, or a little consolidation bar, a little period of consolidation just in here. US Treasury 10-year note futures have been under a little bit of pressure. Here's the lines. There was an attempt to support the market last week, which appears to have failed this week, although volume was low, so prices come back on relatively low volume. So selling pressure doesn't look particularly strong, but the market is weak overall, and it's come back to this level where breakdowns happened previously. The level goes right through here like that. So a break below this level would be significant for the market, and it looks like it might just drift down there on a lack of buying support, even though the sellers aren't particularly strong. The market does certainly look like it might drift lower here and effectively break down. Last gasp support comes through here. So there's a little bit of room where the market could attempt to find support right at the very lows of the range. Here's the breakdown line really. This is last gasp here. Copper price futures. And here's the lows of the previous range. Here's the current lows of the range. Now this week's spread has narrowed on an increase in volume. Remembering this market's under pressure because of the strength in the US dollar. That makes it more difficult. And I would suggest the market's attempting to absorb the strength in the US dollar this week. It's not looking particularly strong, but spread has narrowed and volume increased, and that's not going to happen unless there's support being offered to the market. So I would suggest the market's attempting to absorb the supply that's being drawn out. Well, just have a quick look. Here's the daily chart. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the first bar this week. Remembering that this bar looks like this. And this bar looks like this. We can see the market initially came down on average volume. Price pushed lower, but closed well off its low on very high volume. There was an attempt to support the market, and that was confirmed by the next bar being up, albeit closing poorly because the market's under pressure. Price then comes back on average volume and attempts to support adjacent to the lows here. So there is some modest support being offered to the market. The sellers still hold the upper hand, there's no doubt, but there's an attempt to support the market. And that can be seen here with the reduced spread, increased volume. I would expect the market will attempt to test for supply in here, perhaps something like this. If the strength in the US dollar continues, this market will remain under pressure. It just may not go down with ease. It may go lower reluctantly. And that's the market attempting to absorb the strength in the US dollar. If you've got a total breakdown, if this bar looks more like that, then there's a sign of capitulation in the market. So wait and see what we get. I expect the market will attempt to absorb the strength in the US dollar, at least to some degree. Gold price futures. Gold price futures also traded lower this week. Here's the lows of the range. Spread narrowed, volume reduced and was well below average. Selling pressure is only modest in this market. It's reluctant to sell down, but the strength in the US dollar is causing it problems, obviously. This market's not really selling down actively. It's reluctantly drifting lower on reducing volumes. You want to have a quick look inside that bar like we have on some of the others. I expect it will illustrate the same thing. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is the first bar this week. Price is just drifting lower on very low volume. You can see all the volumes this week have been below average. The price is drifting lower. There's almost no thrust lower here and a very narrow spread on well below average volume this week. This market is reluctantly going lower. It's just drifting lower. There's no real active selling. And this bar here with the higher upper tail suggests a little bit of absorption has taken place on this higher volume. That's a form of accumulation, some buying support. Price goes up, drift lower. It's sort of a buy the offer sort of situation. and in response you got a little narrow spread bar on very low volume. Silver price futures. Silver price futures are always a little more volatile than the gold price futures. You see volume was very high this week, so some traders have likely dumped their stock as price continued lower with the strength in the US dollar. Now, spread did narrow this week. Volume was quite high, so some buying support may have come in. Perhaps we'll look at the daily chart on this one as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This was the first bar this week. It was a down bar. It was pretty serious. Next bar saw spread narrow just a little bit, but there was still overwhelming supply being drawn out, no doubt. And then the next bar, on still pretty high volume, saw price hardly move lower at all, and the next bar was up on high volume. This was buying support coming in here and here. And then the last bar this week, price was down very slightly on much reduced volume, the lowest volume for days and days. So this was likely like a test for supply. So you've had the market move down, you've had buying support come in on these two bars, and then a test for supply here. So this is the market attempting to absorb supply, to absorb the strength in the US dollar. Some buying support came in at the lows. Now just be careful in this sort of market. If price continues lower, this buying support is likely to be quickly dumped and price will just push lower again like this. But there's been some speculative support and we'll see how that goes next week. And here's the weekly chart again. And you can see pretty clearly that as price came towards the lows of this complex range, I call it complex because there's like two lows being put in. Spread did narrow this week. Volume increased considerably. We know from looking at the daily chart then, there was selling up here, but an attempt to support the market down here. So we'll just see how it goes next week and see what the response is. Light crude price futures. This has been the highs of the range for a long time now, and the market has challenged the highs this week. There was a test for supply below this level during the week, and price has closed higher just slightly for the week. So what testing for supply happened was successful. Perhaps we'll have a look at the daily chart here as well. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Here's the first bar. It's a modest down bar on below average volume. And you've had effectively a little shakeout. The price has rammed lower and has closed back up high for the day. And then price moved up, issued a challenge to the highs of the range on quite high volume. So there was a push higher, but I expect supply's been drawn out. Prices pushed lower in response, and then there was pretty much just an absorption bar on Friday. So there was a little shakeout here. It's only a small one, and price has attempted to push higher on this bar. Volume was really quite high, and price has just come back on the last 2 days this week to close pretty much at the highs of the daily range. You can see on the weekly chart, here's the pullback and testing for supply, the little shakeout we saw, where prices traded below the previous bar's close, and then prices moved up going into the end of the week. So this is a nice little absorption bar. I expect there will be some supply drawn out from the left here. So the market, if it does attempt to continue higher, will have to grind its way higher. It's highly unlikely price is just going to ram itself up like this. That's very unlikely. Always possible, very unlikely. Much more likely this market will attempt to absorb its way through and it'll move up and down like this in a series of overlapping bars, just like this bar and this bar. They just grind their way through. It pulls back, tests for supply, pops up, and closes as a slight up bar, just with a pressing nature towards the upside. And it'll form a period of bullish absorption or something that appears like that. This market certainly appears to be quite strong at the moment. Aussie dollar currency futures are threatening to break down now. Price has been in this range for quite some time now, and the strength in the US dollar is really putting it under pressure. You've got a last gasp level coming through there. The price is just sitting on it. Volume was low this week, well below average, and that justifies the narrow spread. But with the strength in the US dollar, this is pushing this market down and making it difficult for the market to continue to find support at this level. And you've got the lows of the range down here, roughly there. So if the US dollar continues higher, I expect this market to push down towards this level, 62 to 64. Any weakness in the US dollar will allow this market to at least make an attempt to push higher. If it spends too much time below 66, you'll find that resistance begins to form there, and price will move up to it and fail and continue lower. So the Aussie dollar is certainly under some pressure here, and to a large extent, it'll depend what happens in the US dollar to what happens in this market. Bitcoin futures. Bitcoin futures continue to trade sideways in this range. There's been no shakeout whatsoever. In fact, this is probably a good market to look at the daily chart as well, seeing it's seen a theme this week. Now you can see here's the push higher that I always talk about. The highs of the range come through here, and there was a lack of demand and some selling emerged here. There's the lows of the original range. Price penetrated it, and it's been trading sideways in absorption mode here. This was an attempt to absorb supply here, but it effectively failed on this bar when further supply has been drawn out. Remembering this is the overall range here, it would take a break below this level for price to really fail. So this is all a big period of absorption, and that's what's happened through here. Now, the first 2 days this week saw price move up like this, and price is attempting to consolidate sideways, pretty much at the 50% level of that rise. That's actually quite a strong little push, and if this is successful, I expect the market will respond positively to it, perhaps early next week. So you see there's a push above 30,200, then there might be a little move going on. The highs of the range will come through at 31,000. So you may find price just moves up to that level, but just look to see whether there's a daily price push up towards 31,000 this week. And if there is, that'll mark this period here as a successful little push higher and period of consolidation. And just back to the weekly chart. You can see that on this bar now. Here's the push higher. Here's the initial period of consolidation, which failed. Price pulled back only to a minor level, and price has been consolidating again sideways here. If there's a response higher here, you may see price move up and perhaps close around this 31,000 this week, which would be this level right there, the close of that bar. Now just back to the US dollar index quickly before we wrap up. Here's the important breakdown line. This was the threatening breakdown bar. Price has avoided a breakdown, at least at this point, and appears to be making a pretty strong attempt over the last 2 weeks to absorb its way through this breakdown line. The line above that comes through here. You can see price failed when it challenged it at this level. So whether price effectively fails at this level, I'm not sure yet, but there's certainly an attempt being made to grind its way through. Volumes aren't particularly high, So that tells you that selling pressure in the market is relatively low, at least at this stage. So I'm expecting the market to attempt to continue higher here, and the next level will come through here. So I don't expect it'll be reached this week, but we'll see. Thanks for your time. See ya.